Things in New York are heating up, perhaps in more ways than one. A lot of people ask me, oh, when are you going to walk around? I've been very busy the last, actually 2 months maybe. People saw I was in Florida for a while. I've mentioned this before. I've got aging parents who need attention. But that's not what's keeping me busy as much as people saw I was out there with Sal and stuff. But lawfare has been ramping up. Lawfare against me, lawfare against the president. It's just terrible how these sick, demented people will not give up. You know, everything they do just goes against the productivity. Here's idiots who can't even follow the lights, almost crashing into me. I'm going to refrain from fighting and arguing with them. It's just a waste of time. But it's a beautiful day today, and it's a nice day for a walk in Central Park. So we'll get a nice long walk in here. I would remind people that I've made basically almost all of these Ghost Town NYC walks totally free for everybody to access. I want to thank people who have sponsored the show on subscribestar.com/crowdsourcethetruth, patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth. Thanks to everybody there. Also on odyssey.com/@crowdsourcethetruth. You can't sponsor on there right now. And in fact, see, we got a lot of wind noise today because I wanted to bring I was getting a haircut and I didn't want to bring the whole setup. And there's pros and cons to each of these things. But what I was saying is you cannot sponsor right now on Odyssey because about 3 months ago they lost their payment processor and they've been in the process of reestablishing a new one, but it just hasn't happened yet and I'm not sure when it will. So I know everybody on there followed my advice and transferred to Odyssey to help me out, and now we're getting burned. It's not Odyssey's fault. See, here's the thing. What was so fantastic about Odyssey is that it's not only an independent video channel, it's a video host. See, on these other things, on crowdsourcethetruth.substack.com and on subscribestar.com and even still on Patreon, I need to provide the video hosting through a separate vendor. And that's been Vimeo, which also costs a lot of money. And now, lately, they have been saying, hey, you got to give us more money. So it's this constant tension between what's economically viable for me to deliver to people at a low cost. That's why it was so inexpensive to sponsor on Odyssey. I could offer $3 a month sponsorships on Odyssey, and I appreciate the people who took advantage of that most economical offer. But now everybody who's watching sponsor exclusive content on Odyssey is getting it for free. And it's a great benefit for the people who get to watch the show for free. But keep in mind, the whole point of sponsoring the show is to make it possible for me to continue with everything that I'm doing.
There is 4.
I wonder what she thought of the assassination attempt. My point is, I can't do all this counter lawfare stuff, driving around, going to these different trials. People are very curious about what was going on with Goodman versus the Allegheny County Medical Examiner's Office. That thing had to be postponed. By the way, people can also sponsor by subscribing on X. That's a great way to do it. You can just follow me at JG_CSTT on X and then sponsor on there. And you're going to get sponsor exclusive content there as well. So nothing sinister happened with regard to the continuance of the hearing in Goodman versus Allegheny County Medical Examiner. I was pretty annoyed that the judge in that case has quashed, he allowed the cops to quash the subpoena. I'm still thinking about what I'm going to do about that. I have a couple of options. This is one of the things that fascinates me about the practice of law. And by the way, I always do need to remind people, I am not an attorney. Nothing I say is legal advice. Nobody should take any legal advice from me. I'm not qualified to give any legal advice. I'm just commenting on pro se actions that I'm taking and the various ways in which I'm exercising my rights in court. I filed a right to know action in the county of Allegheny there, asking the medical examiner to provide us with certain information and evidence that I believe is public record that we should have, stuff about how they identified the body of Thomas Crooks on the roof of American Glass Research. I don't believe that was Thomas Crooks for several reasons. It doesn't look like Thomas Crooks to me. Thomas Crooks, as we've seen in videos that his friends have released on social media, videos that I've evaluated and believe are authentic, they show that Thomas Crooks has a unique anatomical feature: 2 nodules of cartilage on the outer helix of his right ear. That hasn't been denied, and in fact, in the facial recognition photo that the police tell us is Thomas Crooks, we see those 2 nodules. That's prominently featured in that death photo that is wrongly categorized as a facial recognition photo. We spoke about that a lot in the past. So there's really no argument that that is a feature of Thomas Crooks. The issue is the photo of the dead guy actually Thomas Crooks? And I say no for various reasons. Allegheny County, remember, that's where Ken Silva, he got the autopsy report. And it was, we'd have to talk to Ken about this, and I have been meaning to get in touch with him. I have some stuff I need to talk to Ken about, but he's been busy, I've been busy. I saw he was in a video with Judicial Watch the other day, so that was good for Ken. I have questions about Judicial Watch, but that's good that they're giving Ken exposure. He deserves it. He's doing great work there with Headline USA. But Ken got the autopsy report, and he also revealed to me certain things about the Pennsylvania Coroner's Act that allowed me to create a right to know action against the Allegheny County Medical Examiner's Office. And after some shenanigans in court there, where first they lost the right to know action, it was found in my favor that the court said, you got to give Jason this stuff. Then they came back, and for reasons that were never explained, that got overturned. You know, there's a lot of shenanigans that go on in court, and there's a lot of what's called judicial discretion. Judges love, in my opinion, to take advantage of that judicial discretion. They abuse it all the time. They're granted far too much judicial discretion. We're learning now about statutory requirements, things that are written into the law where the judge does not have judicial discretion. And again, if anything I'm saying is incorrect, if you are a lawyer, let me know. I'm, again, not an attorney, and anything I say about this stuff could be incorrect. What do these girls think about the assassination? What are they doing here? Some sort of Instagram thing, or trying to earn money, I think. Should be kind of easy for them. Polaroids for $15. Maybe this guy's earning money and these girls are just taking Polaroids of themselves. Just, I wonder about the food safety of this fruit being sold around town. See, everybody here wants to... What is this? Oh, they're providing the fruit that these guys are cutting up? What is this? Unlimited what? Biking? Maybe they're not. Maybe they're just having a picnic. Anyway, there's judicial discretion, then there's statutory requirements. And so I hope I'm learning certain things about the law that will ultimately help me in these cases. But there's one, right, I was explaining why the Allegheny County thing was continued. There's a continuance in that case, meaning there'll be the hearing is moved to a future date. Strangely, they haven't told me when. I don't know why it's taking so long. It took a day for the judge to decide that he was going to allow them to quash the subpoena, but it's taking like a week for them to come up with a new schedule for the next hearing. I don't understand why that's taking so long. Yeah, they still haven't said anything to me about it. Pretty weird, but you know, the other thing that was weird is that when the judge did grant the quashing, allowed the quashing of the subpoena, he didn't give any reason. He specifically said he was going to give the reason at the beginning of the hearing. Now that sounds like not straight pool to me, because don't I have some ability to object to what the judge is saying or challenge? I mean, he's not giving me a reason. That seems like perhaps a reason in and of itself to object, but I think that those subpoenas should have been allowed to be utilized. The thing is, the quashing came from the attorney for Beaver County, the county solicitor for Beaver County, who was representing Chief Detective Patrick Young and also Detective Gian Vito, who is the guy who took the photo. We're just asking, this is the thing, I'm just asking for the original photo from the cop's phone. If I'm wrong and this is all stupid, that will prove that. Why wouldn't they want to prove me wrong? They're saying I'm wrong. Why not prove that? In fact, their refusal to do it basically proves me right. In my view, it doesn't prove me right, but it's strong evidence that I'm right. I think a lot of people see that, understand that logic, and agree with me. I don't know why there's no paddle boats in here anymore. A day like today, normally, for as long as I've lived in New York, there would be tons of people paddle boating in here, And I don't know, I don't think you can fish really. This is kind of like a filthy swamp, but maybe not filthy, but definitely dirty. And used to be, I've had many romantic dates paddle boating on this Central Park pond. But why is that boat thing closed? I don't know. So anyway, the cops should want to give me that evidence, but they don't. They're getting lawyers to quash subpoenas. They're having judges quash them without giving written opinions. Why? I don't know. I think it's to cover it up. But I have a lot of options. I think I could somehow try to challenge this notion of quashing. It wasn't sinister that the thing got continued because it was me who asked for the continuance. And I did that because a certain person who I'm still not allowed to talk about, in my view, in violation of my constitutional, First Amendment rights, that person did a bunch of tricky stuff that resulted in a hearing landing on the exact same day in another state. And I obviously couldn't be at two hearings in two different states on the same day. So the stakes for me personally were much higher in this other thing that I can't talk about yet than they are in the Allegheny case. And also, after the judge quashed the subpoena and it wasn't even a possibility that we were going to get the evidence from the cops, it just seemed like the payoff in the Allegheny County hearing was going to be super low. So I asked the Court of Common Pleas in Pittsburgh, Allegheny County, if I could continue the hearing, and they said yes. County solicitor there agreed. They've yet to give me a new date. So again, nothing sinister going on there, but that's the reason why that was continued. And I'll talk more about the other things soon. Like I said, I can't do it right now. People's minds are going to be blown when I'm finally able to talk about this after 2 years and change. Super bad. Super bad. But that's all right. We're going to make it right. Counterlawfare will never rest. Like I've said, oh, hey, is that a real turtle? Is that a real turtle, you think?
I have no idea. It looks real to me.
It does. He's just hanging out there, not moving. Let's see if we can go down there and visit the turtle without getting thrown in the swamp. It looks pretty steep right there. I don't want to scare the turtle, but this is like a nature video in New York City, isn't it? Here we see the Central Park turtle in its natural habitat. Ah, he's moving. Up, there he goes. Ooh, look, there's another, it's fish. All right. right, we've got a turtle. That's kind of fun, right? Little nature video. Who expected that? So you get a little bit of everything here on Crowdsource the Truth. That's why people should sponsor this show. Follow me on X at JG_CSTT. Got turtles in the swamp there. Did you know that? What did she think of the assassination? What the hell is that? I think it's just a log. So yeah, the options for getting that evidence from the cops, which by the way, I don't think they're ever going to give. It's almost just an exercise in gathering more information and more evidence by continuing these legal actions, because the more times they're compelled to provide it and the harder they push back on doing so, it's just only more evidence that I'm probably right and their refusal.
You have to wait. If she's right in front of you.
This little child scolding going on there. That little girl somehow fell over. I didn't see what was going on. But see, the reason probably that the judge is going to say that he quashed these subpoenas is that this Allegheny County medical examiner's case, it doesn't exactly pertain to the cops. The argument that the guy, Nate, whatever his name is, Nathan, what was his last name? The solicitor for Beaver County. The argument that he made was that their testimony is irrelevant, and finally when he showed up on the day, he said that the Pennsylvania Coroner's Act doesn't require them to turn over information obtained in a non-criminal investigation, whatever the hell it was that he was talking about. He had some pretty specific technical reasons why he wasn't required, or the cops rather, weren't required to give me information, because it just, admittedly, was a bit of a stretch on my part, getting the cops into this. Not really, to tell you the truth, because the cops were there and involved in the whole identifying of the body. And I think they're involved in a continued cover-up with the medical examiner. That's my opinion. Certainly the judge had the judicial discretion to tell them, yeah, Jason's right. This evidence is sufficiently related. You should have to give it to him. But he didn't do that. He didn't use his discretion to do that. Uh-oh, what do we have here? Pickleball? People love pickleball. Why not just play tennis? It seems... No, wait a minute. Wasn't this the ice rink? Yeah. This was the Trump ice skating rink, is now pickleball, it looks like. Let's see. Yeah. Pickleball. Where is the pickle aspect of this, by the way? And isn't that weak sauce to turn a ice skating rink into a pickleball monstrosity? Yeah, it says right there, Woman Rink, NYC. No longer. Now, pickleball nonsense. Mini tennis. How did they even get the name pickleball? Stupid. So the subpoenas were quashed. We don't know why. The fact that the judge hasn't issued a written opinion about that, I think could be grounds to seek to overturn that quashing. I'm not sure yet. I haven't had time to deal with that because I've been so preoccupied with this other thing that I can't talk about. And it's funny, the morons in that other thing will be like, oh, he said another thing about someone I can't talk about. People know who he's talking about. Extend the thing. It's pathetic what they're trying to do. We'll see if that judge continues to abuse her judicial discretion and allows that nonsense to carry on. See, this I support. This is an artist creating his own original work that people can come and buy. That's different than, you know, stealing somebody's Apple headphones and trying to sell them as a criminal, or any of the stuff that all those other illegal vendors do, counterfeit goods. People really shouldn't buy that stuff. But patronizing local artists, that's fine, that's good. So we should get a new date in the Allegheny County case. I don't know what's taking them so long. Usually that happens right away. So there is something sketchy going on there. So my other option for getting that evidence from the cops is they can still be sued in Beaver County. That's where they lost the right to know action. And the judge might say something like, that's the proper county and the proper action for Goodman to pursue this evidence in. If you ask me, that's a cop-out by the judge. They're frequently exercising this judicial discretion. Why is this so crooked here? Let's see if we can rectify this. Seems better. Judges frequently exercise this judicial discretion to do stuff that seems unfair and goes against me. Why not say, yeah, I've got judicial discretion to not quash? He obviously does. They're asking the judge if he will or will not quash. And the primary reason the lawyer gave for wanting to quash is that the testimony was irrelevant. I thought for sure when I said, oh, well, you know, I think it's the judge's job to decide if it's relevant or not the job of the subpoenaed individual's attorney. But the judge said, no, we'll just let this guy decide it's irrelevant, abdicate my judicial authority to some fat lawyer. I don't know, maybe I'm wrong. We'll hear from Judge Regan why he decided to do that. Cop out. But I can't say that there's necessarily lawfare going on there. I don't know. The lawfare, however, does extend to Goodman versus the City of New York. That's a case that's been going on for a long time. That case involves the cops, Elon Musk, Twitter. Do people remember that story about me going to Twitter November 1st, 2022, 5 weeks before the Twitter files were released, to tell Elon Musk about how Adam Sharp, Valerie Caproni, Barack Obama, how they inserted the FBI into Twitter. Details about those allegations weeks before they released any of these internal documents. I've come to believe, actually, that my publication of that, you know, my trying to alert Elon Musk to that, that's what led to the release of the Twitter files. And I'm not saying, ooh, hooray, I led to the release of the Twitter files. I think the Twitter files was a limited hangout to cover up and avoid the Twitter coup. And I think that's why Matt Taibbi, Michael Schellenberger, Mike Benz, they've so just avoided anything about the Twitter coup. I mean, they've literally treated it like poison ivy. People say, oh, you know, those guys are important and you're a nobody, Jason. Maybe, but there's plenty of important people who I've spoken to who forget about me. It's what I'm talking about that they find interesting. And they'll take it up if it's interesting. And remember, Miranda Devine, when I texted it to her, she called me and was like, this is unbelievable. Did you write this? And I said, yes. And she said, by yourself? And I said, yes. And she said, I'm going to give this to the news desk. Never heard from her after that. Never responded to a text after that. Never was it published in the New York Post. Nothing. Nothing at all. Almost as if, and I'm not saying this happened, I have no direct evidence that this happened, but it's almost as if the news desk at the New York Post said, get this out of here and don't ever talk to this guy again. Almost like that. But I'm saying, it seems weird to me that so many people would see this information, and not just random people who were talking all about the FBI and what they did at Twitter. Miranda Devine wrote a whole book about the Hunter Biden laptop. Adam Sharp and Vivian Schiller, they were directly involved. Adam Sharp took over Vivian Schiller's job at Twitter after Schiller left, and Vivian Schiller was the individual who went on to run that tabletop exercise for the Aspen Institute, where they were saying, oh, you know, let's imagine there's a leak about Hunter Biden's laptop and Burisma and all this. They were preparing everybody in the mainstream news for how to deal with that. And here I am saying, hey, look, I have all this evidence about Adam Sharp and him working directly with the general counsel of the FBI, and they're all suing me, cooperating with George's brother. Not that George's brother is a big deal, and I don't want to make a big deal out of him. He's essentially an inconsequential worm. He's sort of a security guard for these people, right? I mean, imagine they're like the UN, and you're not getting in there to see who's in charge of the UN. Definitely not Kofi Annan anymore. But in other words, whoever is in charge of the UN, they're not the ones standing out front blocking you from getting inside there. It's some idiot in a security guard uniform, but if he's the one who's punching you in the face and putting handcuffs on you, he's sort of your direct adversary in that moment. That's the analogy to George's asshole brother. Look at this Jetsons style building. Cool, right? So we're here right outside Central Park. It's a beautiful day. So yeah, I don't want people to think that George's brother is more important than he actually is. He's a thug. He's an asshole. And he's the one that the powerful people pit against me because obviously, first of all, they have bigger things to be doing in terms of the world of evil. And also, he has completely set himself up. He's like a lawfare mercenary, right? He purports to live in an RV and have no, property that he owns or permanent address or businesses that he owns, at least none that are easy to find. He's probably got anonymous LLCs or something like that. Here's the future of garbage with Eric Adams. This Petrosian building is closed, it looks like. That's some kind of Russian thing. We were by there a long time ago with Charles. I don't know if it was closed then, but it is now. But yeah, so there's certain things that George's brother has been very interested in and very interested in agitating. This Goodman versus the city of New York is one of them. He was in communication with Jim Baker before I got attacked outside Twitter. How do you know that, Jason? Because he was sending emails to, among other people, legal@twitter.com. That was in October 2022. And 10 days before I went to Twitter to alert Elon Musk that the FBI had illegally infiltrated, according to evidence that I've seen, I was in Texas and I went to SpaceX. There's like a public parking lot that you can just drive up to there. And I did that. And I said to the security desk, hey, is there somebody I can speak to? Maybe in your communications department or your security department, to share some information with Elon Musk. And they sent out 2 people, security guards. One of them took notes on everything I said. The other one stood there, obviously waiting to beat me up if I did anything weird. And they took this information. I mean, what else can I do? I can't really get in there and talk to Elon Musk. It's difficult to. It's ironic because now, as you hear him talking about, he was at Y Combinator yesterday, or I don't know, I saw the video yesterday or this morning or something like that. He was at Y Combinator talking about how before he was known by anybody, how he was trying to share his ideas and break into working on things on the internet. And he did the same sort of things I was doing, went to the office of Netscape and sat in the lobby waiting to talk to people. So I'm waiting outside for him to come out and walk out into the street or give him some information to some security person at SpaceX. I'm not trying to do anything dangerous or crazy. I'm trying to share information with the guy. But George's asshole brother was contacting their legal department, which at that time included Jim Baker. Now remember, Jim Baker used to be the FBI General Counsel. The sequence there was Valerie Caproni, she was the FBI General Counsel, 2003 to 2011. Then she gets kicked out when John Conyers says she's breaking the law and should be prosecuted. I agree with that, by the way. Still happening, in my opinion. Then Andrew Weissman, professional scumbag, he becomes the FBI general counsel. I can't remember exactly when he got kicked out or left or whatever. He's the guy, he's now an attorney, or he was a partner at Jenner and Block, one of the law firms that Donald Trump has pulled the security clearance for, and now there's tons of lawsuits from Norm Eisen and Mark Zaid saying, oh, that's unconstitutional, that's a violation of the First Amendment. These idiots are making an argument in court that they have a First Amendment right to a security clearance, something that the executive branch and the chief executive, namely the president, is really the only person in the US government who has the authority to give that out. The courts should have no discretion whatsoever in the area of who gets a security clearance, because it just creates a huge opportunity for malign actors and espionage actors to come and get security clearances and challenge a refusal to give it to them or a withdrawal of one in court. It just cannot be the way that it works. We can't have judges running military intelligence, and people see that there's a judicial coup underway, and I'm trying to fight that. George's brother represents the people who are trying to fight me. Valerie Caproni, Adam Sharp, Ben Wittes. This is my allegation. It hasn't been proven yet. I'm basing it on information and belief, evidence that I've seen in the public domain. You might evaluate that evidence and come to a different conclusion. I think you'd have to be crazy to do that. But that's my pure opinion. You're free to hold an alternate opinion, but not according to some people who I can't talk about. They want to tell you what is information and what is disinformation and what can be discussed on the internet and who needs to be removed from the internet. We hear Barack Obama talking about that same shit just the other day at some meeting, saying that, oh no, we can't have this malign influence on the internet. People aren't idiots. They should be able to listen to whatever they want and decide who's saying something sensible and who isn't. They're just so hell-bent on controlling information on the internet and controlling who can say what. It's sickening. It's un-American. Barack Obama needs to shut up and go away. Worry about what his damn Wookiee of a wife is talking about, where she's saying she's glad she didn't have a son because he would be too much like Barack Obama. That's some cold shit. That's harsh for your wife to say that. Pretty bad. So we're approaching Times Square here. Let's see how the craziness is these days. It's been a little while since I've walked through Times Square. But yeah, they're hell-bent on controlling information on the internet. And see, the reason they don't like me is that I've developed, this is again my opinion, I've developed, this guy's selling stolen goods. Where'd you steal all this from? Criminals. Why don't the police just roll these losers up? It's obviously organized crime. They don't like me because, in my opinion, I've developed these pretty resilient methods of staying on the internet by asking people to sponsor me on these various things rather than relying on advertisers who could easily be intimidated. See, the traditional model is you get lots of advertisers. Who are these criminals? You get lots of advertisers to sponsor your show, and then they can intimidate those advertisers to stop sponsoring you. Like, imagine if this show was brought to you by Name the Brand, and they were paying me $10,000 a month. First of all, they'd have influence over the content, but even if they didn't have direct influence over the content, somebody who didn't like what I was saying could lean on that sponsor, get them to go away, and now suddenly I've got a huge financial problem. No money. I can't continue with the show. So they've been doing that, but it's complicated because I have all these different ways that people can sponsor me. People could follow me on X @JG_CSTT, and they can subscribe there You're going to get access to the sponsor-exclusive content, and it supports the show. You can also sponsor the show on subscribestar.com/crowdsourcethetruth or patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth. Two great ways to sponsor the show. You're no longer able to sponsor the show on odyssey.com, and I suspect that the same people I'm talking about had a role in that because they were indirectly putting pressure on Odyssey. Odyssey solved a lot of my problems. They made it possible for me to offer the most economical sponsorship to everybody. They were a video host, so I didn't have to pay a third party for that. The more people who were watching, the more money Odyssey made, so that solved that problem. And they also were a credit card processor, so somebody made it so that the credit card processor was no longer working with Odyssey, and they wanted Odyssey to exercise all kinds of content moderation policies because they didn't like it that Odyssey was allowing people to say what they want and exercise the First Amendment. They wanted to be able to impose European and American, disinformation governance policies to stop people from saying whatever they want. And Odyssey, I commend them, stood up to that and said, no, we'll find another way to sponsor or pay our people. Unfortunately, they haven't found that way yet, and that's a big problem for me. So if you're watching on Odyssey, please be aware that you're no longer sponsoring the show, and maybe you're not able to sponsor the show anymore. I appreciate that, but if you do want to continue sponsoring the show, please select another platform. You can go to crowdsourcethetruth.substack.com or X, any of those. It would be great. But anyway, back to Goodman versus the City of New York. So that's the case where I was attacked outside the place. And the thing that's so strange is the people who attacked me, they really seem to be security personnel working for Twitter, which means they would have been hired by Elon Musk. And there's a lot of reasons why I think that. Of course, the court has ignored it all and issued some ridiculous opinions. Basically, one of the claims I've made in there is that the police denied my First Amendment rights. And what I'm talking about is the day after the attack, I went to the 6th Precinct and I said, hey, you guys wouldn't take a police report yesterday, and you said there was no assault, but here's evidence in the form of finger marks on my neck, red marks where the guy squoze my neck, and the cops refused to take a report. Well, they can't do that, I've learned since then. First Amendment is not just your right to freedom of speech on Twitter and X and everywhere else, YouTube, etc. It's the right to petition the government, including the cops. So when you're going to the cops to tell them, hey, I think I was attacked by people who work for the cops, because it's not just security working for Elon Musk. There's a lot of evidence that would seem to support that these security personnel might have been private security. What is this?
Perfect. That's awesome. Thank you so much.
It's a fat woman teaching yoga.
Nothing can feel more luxurious than paying attention.
What could be more luxurious than laying in the street in the middle of Times Square?
One more quote.
This is just ridiculous.
One of my
Sorry.
favorites by Kaylee Drake. She says, slow living is not about living your life in slow motion.
What the hell is this?
It's about doing everything at once.
So the First Amendment is not just freedom of speech on the internet, it's the right to petition the government. And, I think that this security force was provided by the NYPD. First of all, because we've got information that Ed Caban was doing that. The police commissioner, this looks more like someone who could teach yoga, but what the hell is going on? Subsequent to that attack, we learned that the police commissioner, Ed Caban, was basically fired due to accusations that he was doing exactly that, shaking down local businesses to get them to hire private security, like the people who attacked me. Look at this. What is this? Lilo and Stitch? Pokemon? That's got to be hot inside that costume. This is crazy. So instead of exploring these, detailed, documented, well-founded allegations, the court just dismissed the case out of hand and also just avoided the allegations. They made up this stupid straw man explanation that I was claiming that the police were retaliating for my journalism. I never said that. You'd have to be an idiot to read the filing and come to that conclusion, or else deliberately trying to come up with anything other than what I was actually talking about, which is, I think, a combination of both. We've got idiots running that court, and they're also working to, cause me to lose no matter what. Now, look, I filed this appeal 2 years ago. When was that case dismissed? 2023 sometime, I think. Maybe 2024. Maybe 2024. The appeal was filed, I guess, September 2024. Because I remember it was days after the case was dismissed, something like 6 days after the case was dismissed, that it came out that Eric Adams was under indictment and that Ed Caban and his twin brother, in a very Batman style, were accused of shaking down businesses where the twin brother was dressing up as the police commissioner and saying, hey, you're having problems with criminals, you should pay the cops several $1,000s. The other evidence that Elon Musk had some sort of illicit relationship with the cops is that his security guards had concealed carry weapons. You're not allowed to have that in New York City. How did he get that? It smacks of some sort of illicit deal with the cops. But they ignored all this. I mean, this is the type of evidence that a truly curious and interested in pursuing justice court, anybody interested in pursuing justice and the truth, should want to know the answers to these questions. What the hell were these guys doing with concealed carry weapons? I also had another cop recorded on video talking to Google about providing private security. So it's like, there's almost no question. There's so much evidence, but yet they just come up with some alternate stupid story that has nothing to do with what I was talking about and dismiss the case based on that. So as of today, my appeal in Goodman versus the City of New York is on the docket. It's down there at the Second Circuit. And now the appellees, Elon Musk, Twitter, Adam Sharp, the cops, they're all going to have to, they don't have to do anything. They could ignore it. But what's likely to happen is they're going to enter responses and they'll make up whatever kind of nonsense they've been talking about. And we'll see. I've come to believe that the Second Circuit is every bit as corrupt as the district court, I hear people like Turley. I've lost a lot of respect for Turley only because he furthers some ridiculous stuff like, oh, this is bad, but Trump will win on appeal. Why do you think that? If the main court is corrupt, why wouldn't the appellate court also be presumed to be corrupt? I think what we need to do is figure out the source of corruption and root it out. But nobody is talking about that. We've got idiots. There's CoreWeave powering innovations in AI. Actually, wait a minute. That's got something to do with what Odyssey was talking about, doesn't it? I think. I don't know what that is. Nobody is talking about rooting out the corruption. We've got even people in Congress who I think are lawyers are saying, oh, we need to ban nationwide injunctions. No, that's not it. District court judges, you're never going to get that over the line. They have to have nationwide power. Because one of the functions of the district court is when you have a dispute with somebody in another state, like if you're in New York and somebody else is in Virginia, there's laws in Virginia, there's laws in New York, so federal law has to supersede. And if you want to stop somebody from doing something in Virginia and Washington, D.C. and California and Florida, you might need a nationwide injunction and it might be justified. So they're never going to get over the line with a blanket ban of nationwide injunctions or attempting to reduce the district court's power in that regard. It's just stupid. And it's going to burn up a lot of, make a lot of smoke and noise about something that's not even the point. What we need is for Congress to statutorily define Article 3 of the Constitution's Good Behavior Clause and provide the public with a mechanism for accessing it along the lines of what I was talking about, either a special clerk within Congress who can hear that sort of stuff, or a way that citizens could make criminal referrals to the U.S. attorney in whatever district you're in if a district court defies that, and then get a way to remove the judge where the judge is, sent a notice that they're given an opportunity to admit that they've forfeit their judicial authority for violation of the Good Behavior Clause. And if that finding is made through a process defined by Congress, that cannot be the same as impeachment, because that's not how the Constitution is written. There needs to be a mechanism, and it should involve public oversight. The thing that I've written on X about the Judicial Accountability Act makes a lot of sense. A lot of people have read that, including lawyers, and told me that it's grounded in law, it's well-reasoned, and it makes a lot of sense. I'm not saying it's 100% done or correct, but it's certainly an excellent framework, and it's been being ignored because we've got a broken system here. And it's not just broken, it's like a seized engine that's locked up and can't move forward. And part of the problem is there's no way to get justice. That's why I'm in the Second Circuit with Goodman versus the City of New York. We're digging down. We're dealing with things that might implicate the mayor. Just remember, there's another whole aspect to this with Elon Musk, and I'm, really annoyed with Elon Musk because I'd like to like and trust him, but I find it virtually impossible to do, because if he were trustworthy, I find it almost impossible that he's unaware of this Goodman versus the City of New York. He evaded service for 6 months. He was served because he's being sued in New York through the laws of New York, which are much different than Texas. If I had sued him in Texas, I would have had to go to the DMV and do all kinds of stuff. This guy's giving out pizza. But in New York, when you attempt to serve somebody at their home and they're not there, you can do what's called nail and mail, where the documents get affixed to the front door of their residence and mailed to them via certified mail, and then they're considered served. So that's what happened with Elon Musk. He eventually did appear by counsel in the case, meaning somebody had some conversation with the lawyers. So he didn't read that, he didn't get briefed on what's going on there. And if he did, why didn't he say, wait a minute, our security people choked this guy? My personal bodyguard witnessed the whole thing and lied to the cops? That's the thing. There's so many allegations in my case that even if they can get rid of some of them, what about Elon Musk's security lying to the cops? What about the evidence on video and the photographic evidence of the injuries that supports the claim that I was assaulted and the police refused to take a police report? The police gave me a summons, a disorderly conduct summons, which had been dismissed as facially defective, meaning they had no probable cause and no good reason to give it to me, something that the court, they just presumed, yeah, the cops had probable cause. I said, no, they didn't. And see, what I didn't have at the time that I initially said that, it's pointing the other way, ladies. What I didn't have at the initial moment was the certificate of disposition, which is officially stamped by the New York Criminal Court saying this thing was facially defective and dismissed in Jason's favor. That supports my allegation, my claim that the cops did not have probable cause to issue that ticket, and they did it in support of their corrupt effort to protect the identities of the people who attacked me, who they admit in sworn testimony. The signing of the summons says that the undersigned swears under penalty of, it's a misdemeanor, it says, for the cops to lie on there. And they lied. Look at how far the mighty have fallen. Weed world. Amazing. For rent. So the cops admitted in that summons that they knew the person who choked me. An individual known to the department, it said, told the undersigned, the cop writing the summons, that the defendant created a public disturbance. So if that's true, how is the only guy they interviewed in the public, Elon Musk's bodyguard, how is it that he said he didn't see or hear anything? How could there have been a disturbance if the only guy standing there 5 feet away didn't see or hear anything? The whole thing doesn't make sense. So again, people can say, oh, the courts are corrupt. I am laying this out here, as Charles would say, chapter and verse, for exactly what the corruption is and how it's executed and why it needs to be stopped and how it should be stopped. Well, will the Second Circuit do anything about this? I highly doubt it. Because what compels them to do anything about it? They're going to suddenly decide to expose the corruption of the cops, the corruption of the lower court. This judge, by the way, Jessica G.L. Clark, she used to work for Tish James for 4 years before she got appointed by Joe Biden to be a judge. She was 39 at the time of that appointment. In my opinion, far too inexperienced and young to be a judge. Her judgment is awful. She allowed George's brother to send letters around to attorneys in the case in which he referred to me as, I don't even know if I can say this on these channels, as an effing Jew. How does that help the case? Why is she allowing that? She has a duty to keep outside interference off the docket and maintain order, but she refused to do it. I laced into the judge in this appeal, saying that, this calls her judgment into question. Obviously, it speaks to an unfair bias against me. I mean, it's outrageous when you look at the totality of things the courts have allowed to happen over the last 8 years. So this has become really one of the longest missions of my life. It didn't take me 8 years to build a 3D camera. In fact, we're approaching the useful life of that 3D camera. It took me about 3 years initially to develop. It did go on for a long time after that, but really the heyday of 21st century 3D was 2003 to maybe 2014. 3D was basically done by then. Yeah, I mean, by the time the last major production was Daydreams of Dubai, and then the whole thing went down the drain after that. So 8 years on this Coutnerlawfare project, and really I'm just getting started. The first several years, I have to say, I didn't really know what I was doing. I'm still not an attorney. I don't plan on becoming an attorney. I'm not pursuing that avenue, but I'm becoming a Coutnerlawfare expert. We'll see what happens in this case that caused the continuance of Goodman versus Allegheny County. It's a very important case. It's going to decide a lot about my future and the future of my adversary in that case. I wish I could tell people more about it now. We're only a few days away. I feel very confident about what's happening there, and it is poised to be the greatest Coutnerlawfare victory so far. This is almost like a Coutnerlawfare Moab being dropped on the mountain. Penetrate through thousands of feet of concrete to explode the target. Figuratively speaking, in a legal sense, that's a tough-looking dog. But yeah, it's a beautiful day for a walk, and I wanted to let everybody know about all these developments in the world of Coutnerlawfare. When I saw that my appellant brief, which I spent a lot of time working on. So again, I mean, people are like, oh, when's the next walk coming? I'm not like sitting around doing nothing. I'm being subjected to incredible lawfare efforts millions of dollars have been spent on this by my adversaries, and I'm not estimating that. There are 990s that have been filed that show payments to law firms well over $1 million. Not to mention that's just one law firm. There's a lot of people spending millions of dollars to try to stop me from what I'm doing. So please sponsor the show. It's only $5 a month. You can become a sponsor by following me on x.com at JG_CSTT and then clicking subscribe. You'll be charged $5 a month by X, and then they send me money. Thank you to people who are sponsoring on X. It's not that many, but I encourage people to follow on there, sponsor on there. You can also become a sponsor on subscribestar.com or patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth. Get access to huge libraries of content on there, sponsor exclusive content and other stuff, the regular free stuff. Thanks to everybody who's sponsoring on there. You can still subscribe on Odyssey. It's free, and all the videos are there, even if you just want access to old free videos that have been deleted from YouTube, which is another part of their action against me, deleting my videos from YouTube so people can't go back and see how I've reported on their sinister activities of the past. But you can't sponsor the show on Odyssey, and even if you've historically been a sponsor on Odyssey, you aren't being charged. As a courtesy and a thank you to everybody who's sponsored for so long on Odyssey, I've continued to provide the sponsor exclusive videos on there. But I don't know what Odyssey is doing. I hope they can reactivate some form of payment processing soon, because it really hit my bottom line. I spent months and months telling people to switch to Odyssey, and thank you to the people who did. I realize it's inconvenient to switch back and forth all the time, but this is what they're trying to do. This is what the lawfare practitioners who don't want you to see what I have to say are repeatedly doing to thwart the effort. So please become a sponsor on crowdsourcethetruth.substack.com or one of the other sponsorship channels if you can do it. Oh yeah, we got to vote for mayor, vote Aki. I'm really troubled by this because I don't want, what's his name, Mandami Zohan, to become the mayor. And it does seem strategically like voting for the big idiot Andrew Cuomo is the best way to make sure that doesn't happen. I was looking at an earlier poll, and it doesn't look so good for, I like that, it doesn't look so good for our friend Curtis Sliwa. I'll check the polls again. And I would like Curtis Sliwa to win, but I just don't know if that's possible. I feel like there's been a lot of money spent on Zohan Mamdani. People saw, I'm not even saying anything about him being Muslim or what he said about Jews or Israel or any of that. That's not my issue with him. My primary issue with him is that he's a socialist and a moron, and he was down there at Tesla participating in a economic attack. And it's not even like, oh, I'm defending Tesla. Like I said, Elon Musk has been kind of a jerk to me. It's that I just don't believe that that was the First Amendment. I believe that was criminal activity down there. So it's another question I have between Elon Musk and Eric Adams. Why they have the same attorney? Elon Musk, everybody knows, it's written about in the book, his attorney and friend is Alex Spiro, but yet for some reason Quinn Emanuel and Alex Spiro declined to represent Musk in Goodman versus the City of New York. I think it has to do with something that we wouldn't learn for 2 years, which is that he's also representing Eric Adams, who now it's come out Eric Adams can't even pay him. So why? Why wouldn't the attorney just drop Eric Adams? Normally, like when you can't pay an attorney, that becomes an issue pretty damn quickly, in my experience. John Snyder, when I had difficulty paying him, that's when problems began. And they begin kind of instantly, but not with Eric Adams and Alex Spiro. Weird how that worked. I think there's some bigger interest there that motivates Alex Spiro to want to represent Eric Adams. And why, as I'm saying, they obviously know each other. Why wouldn't Elon Musk just call Eric Adams and say, hey, why are you continuing to issue permits for these protests outside of Tesla 3 weeks in a row? Could you just move that protest to Washington Square Park, please? Or maybe somewhere else? I don't know. But anyway, thanks for watching, everybody. Thanks to everybody who sponsors the show. If you aren't sponsoring the show, please do. It really helps a lot and will help me continue. If you like what I'm saying, even in the free videos, it's very important that you become a sponsor of the show. Follow me on X at JG_CSTT. Here's more future of garbage from the failed mayor, Eric Adams. Have a great day, everybody.